papers and gadgets. So yeah, I will be monitoring. Every speech. So right. So ladies and gentlemen, please, if you can switch off the microphone, and I'm going to start. We are, let me check if it's recording. Yes. So 1, 2, 3, we are on. 1 second. Good afternoon. Welcome. Welcome to Enjoy Vintage Sustainable Fashion podcast. This is the episode 6. My name is Iri, and I am the founder of the podcast series Join the Textile Revolutionary Movement. Today, we are celebrating the first anniversary since the launch of the podcast on April 26, 2024. Yuppie. So Enjoy Vintage SF is a no-profit association, self-funded, with no political ties, and free from any commercial bond or any sort of ownership. Therefore, what you will hear today is unfiltered news supported by an open platform gathering the top international leaders, campaigners, strategists, academics involved in finding practical solutions to what I call the fashion pandemic. For the record, we value our integrity and transparency, and we will keep offering a free, honest platform to all the international leaders willing to unveil the truth behind the tragic trade of the import and export of dismissed plastic clothes shipped from Western countries to the global South, leaving the local population with no choice but to deal with the environmental disaster caused by fast fashion and second-hand industry. Today, we will discuss, analyze, and uncover the following topics: waste colonialism, the plastic clothing trade affecting the global South, greenwashing allegations, investigating Copenhagen Fashion Week and other alleged sustainable fashion shows, the tax havens refugees, fast fashion giants escaping lawful financial investigation, moving their headquarters to Fiscal Paradises, and now facing a grim reality with the US President Donald Trump signing an explosive executive order on the 2nd of April 2025 to end the minimis exemption, a rule that allows small packages worth less than $800 to enter the US tax-free. For packages from China and Hong Kong, the executive order is already effective. Despite the global criticism, let's not forget that for years, the Chinese giants of fast fashion have been prospering by taking advantage of a US tax loophole. Maybe the trend will change, and we might even witness the fall of the Chinese Textile Dragon. Let's wait and see. The infamous textile warlords running the second-hand industry with consequential damages causing an environmental disaster to African countries, local population sabotaging the local industry development. I do wonder how they sleep at night. Next time, we will investigate some of the major textile collectors, like Wilcox Textile, which is one of the largest licensed textile reclaimer and processor in the UK, with over 80 vehicles moving 900 tons. Listen carefully, 900 tons of material each week. This is greenwashing allegations on Copenhagen Fashion Week. The complaint was filed by anti-greenwashing expert Tanya Gotthardsen, apologies for the pronunciation, to the Danish Consumer Council. We did offer an opportunity to comment against the greenwashing allegation and hearing also their side of the story to the Copenhagen Fashion Week and the other 7 fashion brands involved, but with no joy. We have also reached out to Tanya Gotthardsen, just to have a direct comment or maybe an appearance here on the podcast. Today, we are joined by an incredible group of panelists, and these are some of the top international leaders guiding the fashion industry towards an extremely challenging transition. So please welcome keynote and speakers. Keynote, Lars Fogh Mortensen, who is an expert in circular economy and textile from the European Environment Agency, also known as the EEA, and he is also a member of the Club of Rome. We have as special guest and commentator, please welcome Michael Stanley Jones, who is a senior research advisor and member of the Circular Research Foundation in Italy. As international speakers, please welcome the amazing Nina Gabor. Nina is a sustainable fashion educator, an international speaker, researcher, a clothes swap maven, and eco-stylist. Eco-styles engaged with media, councils, organizations, schools, community, and individuals to develop strategies for system change towards an holistic, circular, and sustainable fashion future. Nina is also the director of the Circular Economy and Waste Program at the Australia Institute. She was featured in season 3 of ABC TV award-winning environmental series War on Waste. And she has also just launched, just yesterday, a new project which is called Clothes, Swap and Style. It's a new concept, and she will talk to us about this amazing project later on. Then we have Dr. Liane Thiel-Rutkowski. Dr. Liane, she is an impact fashion strategist, a peer review contributing author, a best-selling author, and an advisor, strategist, and member of the board of Enjoy Vintage Sustainable Fashion. She's one of my, greatest supporters. What can I do without you? What will I do, Liane? Then please welcome Anyango Okinyo. It's the first time that we host Anyango from Kenya. She's an expert in circular and zero waste fashion, ocean and climate action advocate, co-founder of the Eco Fashion Week Africa. As moderator, I'm afraid you will have to be stuck with me. My name is Irene Iri Nunziante. I'm the CEO and founder of Enjoy Vintage Sustainable Fashion Podcast and Events, and I'm based between London, UK, and Italy. And I'm so grateful you are all here today. So thank you so much for being here. But without any further ado, let me introduce the keynote for today. It's an honor really to have Lars with us today. Lars Fogh Mortensen will give a keynote focusing on circularity and sustainability of textiles from a European perspective. This will include the trends in consumption of clothing, footwear and household textiles, environment and climate pressures from the textile value chain, textile waste and export of used textile towards Asia and Africa. Please welcome Lars.
Thank you so much, Irene, and hi everybody. It's really, really good to be here. It's an honor to be part of the event and podcast, and I will talk about the circularity of textiles, and I will share some slides which I will be sharing now. Just a second. Can somebody confirm you can see my first slide here, circularity and sustainability of textiles from a European perspective?
Yes,
Okay,
we can, Lars. Sorry, Lars. Could you, everyone else, all the guests, could you please switch off your microphone, please, when the panelists are speaking? Please. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'll give a status on the circularity and sustainability of textiles, and I will do that from a European perspective, which is where I work and live. I live in Copenhagen. Before I do that, just a few words about myself. So I work at an institution called the European Environment Agency. So we are an EU institution, and we have the mandate to monitor Europe's environment and climate. So it is us who collect all environment and climate data from countries and report that into the policymakers in the EU. This is a picture of a very nice old building in the middle of Copenhagen. And I'm part of the team on circular economy, where we look at circular economy from many perspectives, and I look specifically at textiles. At the same time, also a member of what is called the Club of Rome, that some of you may know or remember. We're about 130 global thought leaders on sustainability. We look to enable humanity to emerge from multiple planetary crises. Some of you may remember the Limits to Growth report from 1972, or the Earth for All report from 2022, and we're now working on a new book on resources and consumption. So let me start with where we are from the European Environment Agency perspective. So we published in March, late March, we published a briefing called The Circularity of the EU Textile Value Chains in Numbers. At the same time, we published a Circularity Metrics Lab. So this is 14 new metrics on textile circularity available online, which we will update every year. And at the same time, we published 2 reports to show all the details of this. One called Measuring Europe's Textile Circularity Through the Lenses of this Circularity Metrics Lab, and one called Textiles and the Environment, the Role of Digital Technologies in Europe's Circular Economy. So this Circular Metrics Lab is available online. Here, if you Google EA Circular Metrics Lab, it's very, very easy to find. And what we have here is these 14 different metrics trying to measure circularity of textiles from different perspectives. And as you can see on the right-hand side, we also have the report that can be read if people are interested in more detail. So I will present from that today. So what we have is these 14 new metrics. This picture here is a picture of the circular economy. You may have seen that one or a similar one. So in the circular economy, we aim to ensure that materials are kept in the economy as long as possible. So we're moving from a linear to a circular economy, and we do that through safe and sustainable design, more efficient production, more sustainable consumption, longer use and better use of products, and waste as a resource. And what you can see here is that we have listed here these metrics with the blue dots, where we have, for example, in the very beginning, the raw materials that are used for textiles consumption. On the top, the water use, the land use, greenhouse gas emissions from textiles. We have the consumption of clothing, how much do we consume, the share of synthetic fibers and yarns as opposed to natural fibers. On the longer and better use of products, we have textile reuse, textile waste, and toward the bottom here, we have some indicators of how much of the textile waste is sent to landfill, what are the microplastics, and what are the exports for used textiles. So I will go through some of these now here with 3 main messages. And the first one is that textiles consumption levels and digitalization has increased, and environmental and climate pressures remain high. Let me show you that with a few numbers and graphs. So this is an illustration of an average closet of an average European. So what we have found is that in Europe, we consume on average 19 kilograms of clothing, shoes, and household textiles on average per person. And this is 8 kilograms of clothing, which you can see in blue here. It is 7 kilograms of household textiles and 4 kilograms of shoes, which is what you can see in red. So that is the average. And thinking about it, we all buy as much is that we can fill a whole big suitcase per person per year. This is why we've included the suitcase here. So what have the trends been in this that you can see here? The blue is household textiles, again, yellow footwear, and green clothing. What you can see is that on the right-hand side, the 19 kilograms is actually higher levels than we've had before. We had some increase over some years, that we had a downturn in 2020 with the COVID crisis, and then it has slightly increased again to 2022, which is the latest numbers we have. So what is the effects of this? Well, first of all, we've looked at the raw material use. So this is the use of oil and gas and many other materials to produce these textiles that we buy and consume in Europe. And what we can see here in terms of raw materials consumption is at the top of this figure is food. So food uses most raw materials. After that comes housing. After that comes personal mobility, restaurants and hotels. And as the fifth biggest is our consumption area of all the monies we spend on clothing, footwear, and household textiles. And that amounts to as much as 523 kilograms per person per year. And we have similar figures for greenhouse gas emissions, for water use and land use. On average, textiles, including clothing and fashion, is the fifth biggest contributor to environment and climate change of all our consumption categories. If you look specifically at greenhouse gas emissions here, what you can see here is actually that our greenhouse gas emissions related to the production of the value chain of textiles, much of it related to the extraction of oil and gas, of course, has been relatively stable and actually decreased a little bit since 2010. The reason for this is that this industry has seen some efficiency improvements when producing the textiles themselves, but still we are at a very high level of 355 kilograms per person per year in 2022. So that leads me to my second key message, which is the increasing challenge to handle textiles waste in Europe and from our exports of used textiles, which is to Africa and Asia. So let me come to that. So you recall that I said that we consume 19 kilos of clothing, footwear, and household textiles, and the waste amounts we produce is 16 kilograms, so a little bit less. So what you can see here is that the textile waste in Europe has been more or less stable from 2016 to 2020. The green part of this is the textiles and shoes that end up in household waste. So this is what we throw out with normal waste, which ends up landfilled or incinerated in Europe. So as you can see, that's by far the biggest share. The smaller share, which is only 4 kilos, is what we separately collect for recycling and reuse. And that is the part which is mostly exported to Africa and Asia. There is some improvement here in what we call capture rate. So this is how much we are actually able to collect of the shoes and textiles. And what you can see here is this has increased from 10% in 2016 to 15% in 2022. But thinking about that, the fact that we are able to collect only 50% of the waste is, of course, not that impressive. So of that, as you recall, so we collect only a small share. Of that share we collect, we actually export by far most of this to Africa and Asia. And what you can see in this figure is this total export out of the EU to other countries. And what you can see actually on the left-hand side from 2005 to 2015 is that we doubled our exports of used textiles, mainly to Asia and Africa. And that has remained quite stable, but at a very, very high level of 1.4 million tons per year. And so you can see we export more or less the same levels to amounts to Asia and to Africa. To Asia, we export it mainly for recycling, so the intention is to be recycled. What we see is that it's sorted a lot in different countries in Asia, re-exported. Some of it is is recycled, but also some of it ends up in nature. In Africa, it is exported for reuse, so to be sold at local markets. But what we see is that some of it is being sold at local markets, but some of it ends up in nature, in dumps, illegal burning, all these kind of things. And we will hear more of that from Kenya, I assume, next. So where does these exports go to? We've tried to illustrate that in this figure. And you can see on the right-hand side what we export to Asia. So most to Pakistan and to United Arab Emirates, where labor costs are very low, also to India, and there's a lot of sorting going on, and then they sort it, recycle some of it, and then re-export to Africa, for example, or to Latin America. Of the part we export to Africa, we export most to Tunisia, to Morocco, Cameroon, and Togo, but there's also very large amounts to Kenya, Ghana, and many other countries. And what we need to be aware of is that EU is not the only region of the world that export these textiles. Our exports are more or less stable, but the exports of used textiles from China especially and from the US is increasing every year, so the amounts are really huge. And that leads me to my final message, what is needed and what is already done to change this. So we need a systematic shift in the textile systems, and we need that for higher quality, longer use, reuse, repair, and recycling. And in the EU, we are very fortunate, also compared to other regions of the world, that we have this EU strategy on circular sustainable textiles that came 3 years ago in 2022. And what you can see here in the text here is that actually the second bullet is that it was a vision of that strategy to have fast fashion out of fashion. So to move away from fast fashion to what you could call slow fashion or normal fashion. It's an aim that all textile products should be on the EU market, should be durable, repairable, recyclable, etc. So very ambitious strategy was put in place then. So what is the status now? The status are that, you know, with the new global developments, with a war in Europe and things changing a lot across the Atlantic, the EU priorities have changed. So the European Green Deal has been replaced by something called the competitiveness compass. So competitiveness and security is top priority for the EU now. Something called the omnibus package. This is a simplification or deregulation of all the reporting requirements. So there will be less regulation on that. And then we have something called the Clean Industrial Deal, which is focusing on competitiveness for the EU industry and making that more carbon neutral. So environment plays a smaller role now. But the good thing from a textiles perspective is that the EU textile strategy is being implemented through especially 3 types of regulation, something called the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products Regulation. So with this, textiles placed on the EU market have to live up to certain eco-design requirements and will have to have the digital product passport, and there's also a ban on destruction, so that is really good. Then we have also something called the waste shipment regulation, trying to regulate what we export to Africa and Asia, actually requiring that those who import it, they can show proof of recycling and reuse. And lastly, we have what we call our Waste Framework Directive, which is extended producer responsibility rules. So basically, all countries are now putting in place systems so that the producers and the brands will be paying for the handling of the waste. So that leads me just to conclude with all of this. So with all of these things happening, the EU textile strategy, and also all these trends of increased consumption, which is basically enabled by economic growth, marketing, by influencers, by social media, all of that results in changes into this industry. And this is what we're trying to monitor with these 4 new metrics we put in place. So our aim is to update these every year so that we can better understand in the future how this sector and industry is developing, whether things are getting worse or whether they're getting better and becoming more circular and more sustainable, which is of course our hope, because that is also the vision of the textile strategy, to move away from fast fashion. So with that, thank you very much. The links can be found here, and I'm sure the slides can be shared with everybody later. So thanks a lot for your attention. I look forward to hearing the others and to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lars. Thank you very much for sharing these very informative slides. So at least we know precise figures. But let's hope that with the EU will implement even tougher regulations, because that's the only hope, is it? Only with tougher regulation, each brand has to be responsible for the extension of the live product, and also with the digital passport. The reality is still what I'm about to show to everyone. So thank you very much, Lars. And then I can share later on also the link to your presentation. Let me show you the actual cost of secondhand and fast fashion. This basically, this report has been basically brought in by Anyango, our guest. She has been, a few weeks ago, I asked her to go and filming the reality in Mandili, in the landfill. Please have a look.
We can see the video, but there's no sound.
There's no sound? Yes, we need translation from Anyango. So even if I manage to, let me show you another video as well. So this is just one of the videos. I have one final video, and then I will introduce Anyango. Can you hear the sound? Yeah. Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me? So these were very powerful images, and apologies if the sound was not available, but it was not in English anyhow. Anyango will translate for us. So Anyango Okinyo is following up on Lars' panel, and she's introducing the real cost of the second-hand industry and dismissed clothing which are shipped to Africa every week. And these items that you have seen, this clothing, they are not recyclable. They are made of plastic. So Anyango will basically talk to us about this experience she had a few weeks ago. She was filming basically she produced the videos, and she will talk to us about the cost of second-hand clothing trade from the global north to the global south from an environmental, cultural, and economic point of view. Please welcome Anyango Okinyo.
Thank you so much, Iri, and everyone else. I'm so happy to be here with all of you today. I know I learned so much. It's so exciting, yeah. So the videos that Iri just shared are from our local landfill. And just as we always say that our waste system is not that well managed. So today I'm gonna talk about, it's almost like it will follow each other. So I had to go to the landfill because then before that, I had a talk with one of the secondhand seller, and he's the one who guided me to where they throw the garments. So I'll be talking today about the cost of secondhand clothing trades from the global north to the global south. So the cost is not only environmental, but also cultural, economical, and as you have seen, it's also affecting us and costing us environmentally. So while the global trade secondhand, this is what people always say, this is what has always been there, this is what has always been said, that the global trade of secondhand clothes help reduce textile waste. Yes, it helps reduce textile waste in the wealthy countries, or should I say in the global north, but it negatively impacts the local industry here. One of the ways is environmentally. As you saw those ladies and the gentleman there, they were telling me how when they bring clothes, well, general waste, but mostly they bring clothes to the dump site after the last bit. And normally before, the last bit was at least a little bit, but now it's almost, I would say almost a quarter, more than a quarter of what they get is always waste. So when I went to the dump site, before I went to the dump site, I went to one of the guy we take second-hand clothes from. As you said, I deal with upcycling. I teach most organizations, most schools here how to upcycle, and mostly we go to the second-hand market to take the clothes that are not in use anymore. So this day, I went to the guy that I take the clothes with, and I asked him where he takes what he does not sell, what we don't take, where does he take them? And he guided me to this landfill, this specific landfill. And the people you saw on the landfill are people who actually live there. And they were telling me the effects, because when they bring the clothes, they just put them direct on the burning fire. It's always burning. So the clothes also burn together with the fire that is already there. So environmentally, a significant amount of secondhand clothing that is sent to us here, always linked to landfill or informal waste systems. We do not have incinerators here. It is either open land or just a landfill somewhere. So that is where they go, and mostly they're burned or they'll stay there. So, and as we know that over 60% of global textile now is made out of plastic, synthetic textile, which is basically plastic. So this is what we get. We get them down here for organizations or people like me. We take some that we can use, which is not always allowed. We take some that we can use, and the rest is left. Well, they decompose, or rather they break down in the landfill, and some are burned, which releases toxic fumes as they are burning. As you saw in the video there, some of them are burning. And on cultural cost, we see the shipping of these clothes, the shipping of secondhand clothes in Africa, let me say specifically in Kenya, it has it has affected us, our traditional clothing industry. Like me, where I stay is in Malindi. I'm located in Malindi, where the traditional attire here was, we call it kanga. I wish I could share my screen, but unfortunately I tried, I could not. You'd see the kangas. That is the local attire. And this attire, it is made out of cotton. It is made out of cotton, and the print on it is the prints are they're got out of the dye, the natural dye. But now we have a lot of secondhand clothes coming in that people are now putting this culture away because, of course, maybe they don't want to buy. They don't want to buy the kangas. Now they're shifting. A lot of people are shifting from this the traditional clothing to now these clothes that are coming down. There are so many that they are so cheap now. And economic cost, as donor countries, when they bring the clothes down here, of course they're benefiting because they're selling the clothes. But us here, I have spoken to a number of tailors, a number of seamstresses, that most of them are now not doing this job anymore. They are no longer seamstresses, they are no longer tailors. When you ask them why, they say there's an alternative. There are secondhand clothes that are cheap, and someone will come to me. They want me to produce a garment, and they're comparing the price with the secondhand clothes, which means if I do that, if I try competing with the secondhand clothes, I won't have anything. So a lot of women, a lot of men that I've interacted with, that is their point of view. So they do not produce anymore. They are not tailors anymore. They are not seamstresses anymore. So they get reduced to repairers. They are repairing now. They are mending the clothes, which is also a good thing because we are promoting circularity. We are promoting staying with the clothes for long. But on the other side, it is good. We don't have a choice, which that is the work they're doing. But economically, these people are suffering because they cannot produce as they are supposed to be producing the clothes, the garments. And from that, I'm part of, as Iri introduced me, I am the co-founder of Fashion Week Africa. And after doing these studies, after doing this research, by the way, I'm not paid by anyone. Fashion Week is not funded by anyone. These things, we are doing it out of passion and the love for our children, the love for our environment, and the love for the future generation, because we feel like there's change, and someone has to go out there, someone has to speak. So in Fashion Week, personally, I'm a seamstress who learned how to do this zero waste sewing and upcycling. So from that, this is the question I ask myself: if I can do this, what if we can onboard more people to do this as well? So that is when I started coaching people. I started coaching some of these ladies. I cannot share the video here, but I have the video of the ladies talking how now at least they can get an income from the upcycling, because now they cannot afford to make a garment from scratch. So our impact in what we do in Fashion Week, we are trying to solve this. How are we solving this? By onboarding people. We go to schools, we go to colleges. There are few schools around, even individual people. So we teach them, we onboard them, we teach them how to do upcycling and the importance of upcycling as well. And that is how we came about with the Fashion Week, No New Cloth Runway. So we have a competition every year in November, where the runway is 100% upcycled garment. So you just come with, you create as a creative, you create because now we have more creatives not using their creation, they're not being creative because the market has taken their source of income. So we came up with this no-new cloth runway where designer comes up with a piece from already existing clothes, which are mostly the second-hand clothes from the market. They buy some from the market. Some use what they already have in their closet. So, and as we started that, we have seen a significant increase in this upcycling, recycling. I'll go to the role of government. And as Glass was speaking, there was a few things he said. He talked about how the clothes have been, consumption has increased. So the reason why I'm so also interested in the Western textile market is because eventually it ends up to us. So if the consumption has increased, what does it mean? It means more burden to us because their consumption is increasing and they're bringing all the clothes again to us. So it means we have to think again. We are being burdened. Yeah, we're being burdened. So we are happy that we are creating a solution, but I also feel like there should be an acknowledgement that there should be a recognition for organizations, for people who are trying to reduce this burden, because it is a real burden. And that is why we call it waste colonialism. So as individuals, that is what we do in Eco Fashion Week, and the government, for the government and the producers, what I would say in conclusion, what we pray for, what we wish for, what we want, the change we want, is to have a more slow fashion production. People are coming up with different ways, or maybe let's produce this. The more, if we produce more, no matter what, no matter the strategy you use, if we are producing more, there will be no change. We still have more coming down. So the best solution, I would say, the only solution is to produce less. If you produce less, then the circularity will make even more sense. Because if you mass produce and we still, there'll be no, like the circularity, it will not make sense. So if production is reduced, and then if production is reduced and then they use more eco-friendly fabric, it will be even easier for us. It will even be easier for circularity to make sense and to work. So if we reduce production, we'll have less waste coming down to us, and then it will be, I would say, it will be much easier to control the market, the second-hand clothes market. Those are part of the solution. And also the acknowledgement of organizations like for, I think there's, Nina has an initiative. So organizations like Nina's initiative, which are promoting circularity. Organizations like Eco Fashion Week, which are also promoting circularities. Organizations like Clean Up Kenya, which are helping in cleaning up all this waste. They need support. Like, we need support. Really, we really need the support, because then we are helping the global north. We are helping the governments. I'm not talking about only the global north government, because also our governments are, I don't think our government in Kenya, let me use Kenya. I don't think they're active as much as we want them to be active. They have to be aggressive. They have to want this change. If they just speak, there will not be change. As you see here, all of us here in this group, I don't think, like, we are passionate. We want the change. we are people who want to see the change. So if the governments also want to see the change, they will make the change happen. Because from our small action, we can see change. I can say I can see change where I am right now, what we have done. There's a huge change which I've seen. So if the governments join in passionately, then we will see change. I think my time is up.
Yes, it's up. But thank you very much, Anyanga. It was very fascinating listening to you. And thank you for sharing direct insights and for taking these powerful videos a few days ago, a couple of weeks ago. I just have a few questions based on your speech. I'm very curious to know if, from a medical point of view, if there is an increase of cancer in the area, in the population living near these landfills. It will be also interesting to get to know this, to get this data. And these are facts, these are consequences of pollution and the living near these textile landfills. Of course, we are witnessing the end of an industry, the fashion industry in Africa, because it doesn't have any chance to flourish, because the competition is just horrendous. And so yeah, the production should decrease, but you should mention that production in the West should decrease, but also based on a very simple economic law, the demand should be less. So people should have, customers should have a conscious, and they should be conscious, and they should actually ask for less. That's the only way, to decrease production. And talking about the Eco Fashion Week in Africa, maybe we could merge the Eco Fashion Week Africa with another sustainable fashion show in Europe. Maybe we could join, or we could join forces with Nina. Nina could, I don't know. I mean, just suggesting some solutions. Well, Anyango, thank you very much for your time, for your presentation. And now let me introduce the one of our top speakers, which is Nina Gabo. She's a friend of Enjoy Vintage Sustainable Fashion. It's the second time that it's with great pleasure that we host Nina. Nina will share her personal insights and knowledge on Copenhagen Fashion Week, on greenwashing, the recent allegations, and also the ongoing investigation launched by the Danish Consumer Ombudsman. Forgive me, Lars, for the pronunciation. And also the tax havens issues. Obviously, the Fiscal Paradise, where the major fast fashion brands like Temu and Shein are prospering with the support of partners company sharing the same legal registration and fiscal address. And then Nina will add some personal insight as well. So Nina, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm going to divert my conversation based on what we spoke about last night, Irene, because I believe Leanne can cover, is going to cover Shein and Temu and the tax havens from these conglomerates. So I think I'm best to follow up with Lars and Anyango's fantastic contributions on waste colonization and the circular economy, to give a different perspective, because this is such a hot topic right now. And globally, there seems to be a conversation war happening between the people who are pro textile waste exportation, who profit from it, and those who are affected by it, as Anyango clearly showed us, because she's there and she's living it and she's seeing it, right? So I'll quickly talk about what I do. So that will help put everything in context. So I have been working in a sustainable fashion space unofficially since I was 15 years old. My love for vintage fashion started as a little child watching classical movies from the 40s and 50s. So I fell in love with vintage fashion. I grew up in the US when I was a teenager. My family, we moved to Nigeria, which is in West Africa, 2 doors down from Ghana, in case you don't know where that is. And there, of course, there's a lot of secondhand clothing imports there as well. when I first discovered this at age 15, when my family moved back there, this was a joy for me because vintage fashion at that time was rife before it became popular, trendy in the global north. And a lot of the stuff I was seeing in films was what attracted me to that trade. Now, as much as I loved it, I also noticed, as Anyango pointed out, that a lot of the local businesses, fashion businesses, tailor shops were all closing down because they couldn't compete with the excessive import. This was long before fast fashion is what it is now. The excessive import of secondhand clothing. They were shutting down, and I noticed, even as a young person, that this was a problem. I also noticed the mountains of waste that were forming mixed with household waste. A lot of the clothes were ending up in these mountains of trash. One thing I particularly noticed that, they smelled really bad, and of course they were toxic, but when it would rain, the rainwater would wash through these mountains of trash into local lakes and rivers that people were using for domestic purposes. And I kept thinking and telling people that certainly this is dangerous, this is toxic. But there wasn't yet a global slow fashion, sustainable fashion movement at the time. So it wasn't yet of interest, and I didn't know what to do. So fast forward years later, I moved to the UK. Now I live in Australia. So my work has evolved from styling, getting people to wear more secondhand, and through the realization that the problem is only getting worse, I moved more into speaking, working with local governments, working more with schools, speaking publicly about these issues, through to running workshops, guest lecturing at universities, just anywhere I could help spread the message and talk about these issues, all the way through to an Australian environmental television show, and also doing research, working with one of Australia's most influential think tanks to influence the federal government through our research on policy recommendations to tackle the issues of textile waste. Now, there's a lot that I want to cover, so I'm going to try. I was making notes as everyone was talking, so I'm going to do my best to cover all of them in this short amount of time. So, I feel like to resolve the problems of global textile waste is huge, and obviously didn't happen overnight. It took decades to get to where it is now, and it's going to require a multifaceted approach. And there's a reason why I'm saying that, and it'll become clear in a minute. We have to tackle it from multiple angles. And I love the recommendations that Lars gave, as well as Anyango, with regards to policies that can help tackle the export of textile waste into countries in the global south. For example, the importers have to prove, whether through a license or some kind of standard of the recyclability and things like that. I think that that's a very good policy that I never considered. So I'm grateful to hear about that. Now I want to go a little bit into the circular economy. In Australia, the circular economy of textiles is still nascent. Here in Australia, we like to do our best to copy what the EU is doing. It's still very nascent. We have a circular economy peak body for textiles called Seamless. So they have a structure that's still being developed. At the moment, they're asking fashion brands to pay 4-cent levy per garment, which will be put together for things like, collecting secondhand and recycling, mending through the circular economy process, which in a report that I co-authored, a research report that I co-authored with last year, we said 4 cents is not enough. We need 50 cents per garment if we're being realistic. Because, when you talk about collecting garments, decommissioning, sorting, warehouse facilitation, labor, transportation, all those things, you need 50 cents realistically. So right off the bat, we felt that wasn't going to work, and it'll just lead to more problems in the future. So I'd like to say more about Australian circular economy, but I'm cognizant of time, and there are more important things I want to talk about. There's a lot of focus in the global north and also here in Australia on individual action. So in the sustainable fashion community bubble, there's a lot of people always, when they hear about these issues, they feel guilty and they want to help. And they say, what can I do? Okay, recycle buy secondhand, do that. We're at a stage where, with the looming climate crisis, with the waste levels getting worse and worse, with ultra fast fashion, we can't be focusing on individual level. That's not even a drop in the ocean anymore. We need community action, right? And this is why I mentioned working on multifaceted levels. We need community action. We need community advocacy. We need communities to collectively, decide on the policies that will be best to turn the tide on these issues and approach their local representatives, right? Local council members, local senators, MPs, whatever the designation is in your country. We need community advocacy, not just individual action of, I buy secondhand and that's the end of it. No, we at this stage, we need legislation, and we need communities and groups to try to work with industry, work with, countries in the global south who are receiving the clothes, figure out what their problems are, and come up with solutions that they take, policies that they take to their local representatives, their local governments, and their federal governments. That's really, really critical at this stage, and we're hitting the overshoot day every year, closer and closer to January. So, and the biodiversity loss is getting worse of using virgin resources. So we don't have time to talk about these little micro baby steps anymore. That just is not effective. I'm sorry. So in the report that we wrote last year about textile waste in Australia, we had a couple of recommendations. One was to, if you go away and the taps are left on, the water taps are left on in your house, you come back and your house is flooded, right? The first thing you do is you don't run back out of the house to go to the shop to buy buckets and mops. The first thing you do is turn off the taps, and then you go and look for buckets and mops, right? So, but what we're doing by not addressing the overproduction and overconsumption and just only talking about circularity and the thereafter reuse is that we're not turning off our taps of waste. So we should be recommending, France proposed that, the tax on fast fashion last year, and we copied that, as we do with a lot of European policies, in our report to say the Australian government should tax fast fashion, particularly ultra fast fashion, right? And that will slow down. It's a little bit of protectionism to slow down the overconsumption of, because Australia is one of the biggest consumers of textiles per person in the world per capita. So to slow down that waste stream, number one, and also allow the nascent Australian, particularly the sustainable brands, to thrive, hopefully, a little bit, right? There are other factors around this that need it to work, but I'm just giving a very simplistic answer here because of time. That's what we recommended. The other thing we recommended was banning textile waste. And I know this seems extreme considering, but the thing is, Australia, we're a population of 26 million people, and we're still, so we're a small country, far, far, far in a faraway land, separate from everyone else. And why we said ban textile waste, even though it sounds extreme and radical, is that there's a lot of innovation happening in circularity. There are a lot of startups here in Australia and also other places in the world. And I'll just quickly mention two of them. One is called Blocktex. They're one of the world's first textile chemical recycling companies. They can separate cotton and polyester and recycle on a granular level. And there's another company, startup, who I have visited, and they're still starting, so I don't want to mention them yet until they're ready. But I visited their manufacturing, their plant, and they claim they can recycle every kind of fabric on a granular level, right? And there are probably others being developed in the world, but what all these startups lack is funding, and they die off because they don't have funding to continue these policies. So it is possible. If we can go to Mars, come on, we can recycle textiles in this world. Governments need to invest in R&D to make it happen. So in Australia, I have met with a few textile startups that are doing all these things to complete the loop of circularity, right? The only option isn't incineration or landfill. We can invest in better ways of reuse and keeping stuff out of circularity. There's another one called a woman named Stephanie Devine as well created the world's first fully compostable garment here in Australia, and she's just like a very small business, very, very small business. Now she's now working with the UN to create a global standard of compostable garments, right? She wasn't backed by the Australian government. She wasn't backed by any organization here. She had to go to New York to get backed by the United Nations. So this is what I mean by governments need to invest in the innovation happening on ground, sometimes even on a grassroots level, sometimes even with the indigenous people, with the traditional ways of looking after fabric, textiles, materials, land, and so on, and support that, engage in that. So because I believe the solutions are there. We're just ignoring them because we don't know about them, right? That's what I think about that. And with regards to the trade, the people who are exporters who profit from exporting this waste, the claims they make in countries in the global south, the lies that they tell people in the global south to make them feel good about sending their clothes, donating or giving their clothes to the exporters who make millions. In Australia, I've been told, I haven't verified, but I've been told in Australia they make $50 million a year from exporting textile waste. They export over 100,000 tons of textile waste to countries in the global south, and it's not true. And they say that it's good quality that they're exporting. That cannot be true, because right now with ultra fast fashion, the quality is so poor. Even when you go to the thrift stores, the op shops, what they call them op shops here, the charity shops, whatever you want to call them, their quality is poor. I've been shopping secondhand since I was 15. I used to get good quality vintage stuff and just quality clothes. Now I don't even want to go there because the quality is so bad. So it can't be true. And then Anyago talked about, the cultural side of it. A lot of those clothes, fast fashion is culturally inappropriate for countries, particularly for countries where you have some Muslim populations and just cultural. People are not walking. I've lived in Africa. People don't wear miniskirts. It's inappropriate in a lot of spaces, majority of spaces. And, tops that are open and low cut. That's a lot of what fast fashion is nowadays. So it is not true. There needs to be a shift. There needs to be a change. And with regards, they tell the lies that by people selling clothes to the global south, they are helping people there. This is not 1950. This is not 1522, and Africans are wearing fig leaves. They do not need people's trash. They do not need it. They need to stop that. This is not even just waste colonization. This is colonization in its original form by giving that rhetoric to people in the global north. It is not true. Africans are and also people in other countries in the global south and Asia and Latin America are very resourceful. They have their own traditional wares, which also evolves in its modern way. So they need to be allowed to use their own resources, whether it's cotton and so on, because I think 90% of cotton in sub-Saharan Africa that's grown there is exported, at artificial prices. So they don't make the profits that they should in most cases, not all, but most cases. So people in those countries need to be allowed to develop their own cultural wares and allow that to evolve as well to whatever it will be, right? And so one of the lies is that the people in those countries need the clothes. The second lie is that there's jobs. That's not a lie, sorry, that is true. There's over 1 million jobs in the global south are made. But here's the point. And Anyago, I see you shaking your head, I know, but let's humor them and say, yes, jobs are being created. Let's just humor them. 1 million jobs are created in the global south a year from textile waste. Okay, what's the quality of those jobs? People digging through trash to find clothes to go and sell when they live in a country that potentially, possibly grows a lot of cotton, that they themselves could be the designers making clothes, but because that industry is not allowed to develop, it's been stagnated deliberately in its infancy. They have to now go with whatever option, because human beings have to survive. So if that's what's available, they have, they are resourceful people. Human beings are resourceful, so they're going to go with the waste and try to make the best of it, try to upcycle it, try to turn it into a resource so they can survive. So someone who potentially maybe has skills in fashion to be a designer or a pattern maker or sourcer of garments or whatever, or cotton grower or whatever, is now reduced to sorting through trash, other people's used stuff, right, to sell and feed their children. That's not right. So that's my other argument to that. And then there's the other argument they give about tariffs. They say that, the tariffs that the governments in the global south charge them on secondhand imports is high. Maybe, but there's a problem because that's not trickling down. The poverty is still very high. It's not trickling. Something's going wrong there. So why would you support that? Why would you continue to say that's okay because the government is that's not right. And I think, unfortunately, and I hate saying this, but it's as if they don't see the humanity of people in global south. You dump stuff in that environment and you don't see the humanity of people there. It's just okay for you to dump your trash that's another issue that needs to be addressed. Seeing the humanity and dignity of people in the global South, I think, is really important. And yeah, so with regards to what people in the global South can do or what's happening, you know, I think people are aware of BRICS, the BRICS countries, started with Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. That's now grown to include Nigeria, Indonesia, and many other partner member countries. Now, the BRICS countries are a union that is trying to, basically they're emerging economies from the global South, and they have over 40% of the global economy so far, and about 55% of the global population, right, with all the member countries that have joined. And their goal is to strengthen the global South cooperation and reform the global governance so that trade is more fair for countries in the global South, and to help countries in the global South genuinely grow and develop. And, you know, they're trying to develop things like cross-border payment. Anyway, this is a diversion, but the reason I'm bringing this up is because when we talk about the industries, you know, allowing countries in the industry to develop in countries in the global South, this is a boost for the national economies of this country. And the tide is already turning with this BRICS movement, this global movement called BRICS, because they're no longer trading with the US dollar, they're changing that. And by not trading with the US dollar and allowing countries to borrow and from each other in local currencies, it helps them a lot. It helps their industries a lot. They can avoid loans, unfair manipulations of the fluctuations in the US dollar. And these are things that will allow these countries to develop. So there is a solution on a sort of a higher level with the federal governments of countries in the global South that will turn the tide if they want to when it comes to things like developing their local textiles industries and have less reliance on imported textile waste. So sorry, this has been
Thank you.
a bit,
No,
yeah.
that's been fantastic.
I'll just round up very quickly. I'll just round up very quickly by bringing it home to what you mentioned earlier about clothes swapping, which is something that I do to work on a community level, on a grassroots level. So clothes swap is where, you know, in the global North, we always have more clothes than we need because clothes are everywhere. So instead of buying new, I host events and I teach people how to host events where they bring the secondhand the clothes that they no longer need or want to the event, and people just exchange. So it's like shopping for free, and that reduces, you know, buying brand new stuff and buying brand new fast fashion particularly. And my goal is to make a swapping part of Australian mainstream culture, because in this country we throw away over 200,000 tons of clothes to landfill and nearly 76 million tons of things, clothes, household items, away to landfill as well. So people need to swap not just clothes but like household items as well. So the initiative that I launched, so Clothes Swap and Style has been around for probably 10 years. Sorry about the introduction, but the initiative I launched is called Swap in the City. So it's a physical place, a hub where people can come and just drop in and swap. So it doesn't have to be an event. You can just pop in, you know, on a Tuesday, you know, during your lunch break and just swap clothes instead of going to the mall and buying something brand new. So thank you so much for listening.
Fantastic, fantastic,
Yeah.
Fantastic presentation. And I can't wait to share this episode, Nina, because I know that many lobbyists in the secondhand industry, they will be listening. Yeah. And your powerful speech is actually, you know, calling up their lies. So it was very powerful. Thank you for sharing.
The thing I just wanted to say is that if you go on TikTok and YouTube, there's a lot of these conversations from young Africans who are saying no more. So it's their voice that's more powerful than mine, I feel.
No, it was very powerful. Thank you very much, Nina. Thank you, and I hope to see you again on the panel. Thank you. And now let's introduce Dr. Liantil Rutkowski. She's always full of surprises, and she will share share her insights and personal investigation on the greenwashing allegations, waste colonialism, and other impactful topics. Welcome, Lian.
Thank you so much. Great to see everybody. Thank you for hosting me today on this wonderful platform. I feel like I need to run like 5 miles now to get all the stress out after listening to Lars and then listening to Anyango and then listening to Nina, because these are not activists. These are realists. These are people that are coming to terms with the real nature of the fashion industry. Okay. We're taking the dresses off, we're taking the suits off, and we're seeing, the bare bones here. And that's part of my issue, personal issue with the fashion industry, is that they get away with what they get away with because they're so, cute and pretty. But in the end, what are they doing? I wanted to comment quickly on Lars in I thought the digital product passport, extended producer responsibility rules, those are things that are really so important to have in the legislation. However, it's just the enforceability of these things that the fashion industry just seems to get away with. And when you think about the fact that we have every second of the day, not every minute, every second of the day, we have a humongous dump truck full to the brim of secondhand clothing walking or driving to the dump. So we have a dump truck every second of the day. And then if you add that up, that's 24 hours of seconds in a day. And then you have a whole year full of this. And this is going to the global south. So when we have the legislation put into place for circularity and other things, are these buzzwords? Are these things that, government funding is latching onto? Are these things that are really impacting? Anyango, God bless you. Anyango is a brilliant designer, and she's spending all of her time fighting the good fight when she could be, and I'm sure she finds the time, but think about it. She's being robbed of her life, essentially, of the gifts that have been given to her. And she's using other gifts to fight the good fight. Now we have Nina, the warrior from Australia, and I love the idea that she has the community advocacy at the heart of what she's working on. Now, you have to remember that in the fashion industry back in the early 19th century, very wealthy women in the North were using birds to stuff on their hats. The more big, funny looking birds you could stuff, the better, the more rich you appeared. You could go to the Kentucky Derby, you could go to the races. So literally in one season, there would be millions of hummingbirds killed. There would be millions of this bird killed, and there were birds that were going extinct. And it was community advocacy that stopped this. It wasn't the government. It was the people. It was we, the people. And it was a group of sisters and cousins from the state of Massachusetts that began the Audubon Society. So we have to rethink of, I hate to say it, who we trust. Nina, you talk about your people bringing their work to the United Nations. Well, think about this. Betterman knows this better than anyone. The United Nations, the actual Alliance for Sustainable Fashion, was begun and launched in Kenya, in Nairobi, 10 miles from Dandora. Okay. And I think what happened when they started the Alliance for Sustainable Fashion. And Michael, I apologize, I love Michael, but I know that he was part of the group, the Alliance for Sustainable Fashion initiation, and maybe they just didn't, realize. But you have to understand that you now have the Nairobi River. Nina was right. These people live a lot, or it was Onyango. Forget who said it. There are people that live along these riverbeds. So when you have the runoff and you have the spillage and you have the environmental issues from fashion, from Dandora, and I'll repeat this to my grave, Dandora was legally unfit to continue being used in 1973. It's 2025. You do the math. So you have children, you have endocrine disruptors coming out of the clothes. This is real. So I present today. So congratulations. I love everything that everybody has had to say. It has to be put in the right perspective. I was talking with Erie the last few weeks, and I started scratching my head, and I'm saying to myself, and don't worry, I do have an update on Shein and Temu, and I also have an update on the Copenhagen Fashion Week. I hope I can fit it in. I will. Basically, is there such a thing as sustainable fashion? Does it even exist? The fashion industry loves the term sustainable because why? It adds value. Oh my Lord, you run into this person and they're wearing this fabulous jacket. And the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, oh, this is so sustainable. I go, oh, really? I said, is it organic cotton? No. And I said, well, what's so sustainable about it? Have you seen how I'm rocking these coconut buttons? So the whole entire garment is made with endocrine, disruptors, but they have coconut buttons on the front. So that it's like when you're in college and, you eat like 3 plates of spaghetti and then somebody gives you, here, have a grapefruit. It'll cancel the spaghetti. So, ultimately, the coconut buttons, sorry, it's not working. But we have been programmed. The world has been programmed. So the sustainable fashion industry, or the fashion industry loves the term sustainable. Let's be clear. There is no such thing. Not when fashion's core business model depends on overproduction, wage theft, and landfill dependency. Every third-party certifications thus far has failed to address these systemic harms because if they had, they wouldn't exist. Certification may validate fiber content, wastewater management, but they ignore scale, right? The dump truck every second. Labor exploitation and waste colonialism. A recycled cotton sheet t-shirt means little when it's part of a collection of 20,000 units. If basically if fashion really wanted to be sustainable, it would need to produce less. It needs to pay garment workers a living wage, stop the flooding of the global south with the textile waste. And until then, sustainable fashion is a branding illusion, not a reality. So ultimately, we're living proof of just what we're talking about. It doesn't even scratch the surface. But the reality is there is no such thing as sustainable fashion. I take that back. I remember I was on a canal boat in Denmark. And I think it was 2013, maybe 14. And I ran into Bruno Peters, who was big with Hugo Boss. And then he started his own collection, Made By. And to me, in my lifetime, I've never seen such a pure brand. That man worried about it. He actually was so transparent that even the thread that he used to sew the buttons, who made the buttons, where they were made, how they were made, every single thing. Now wait, see where this is going. So I'm sitting on the canal boat with him, and we're having a nice chat. And I looked into his eyes. He had spent some time in India, and that's why it transformed him to looking at the world a little different, looking at fashion a little different. So he opens this sustainable brand. Well, he could not keep up with the price points. Eventually, it came to an end because why? It was not sustainable. And Rick Ridgway from Patagonia also told me, I spent some time out there in California, if it is not profitable, it's not sustainable. So you have these issues, like massive issues. And one of the leaders of, if you look into the literature and you try to find whoever came up with sustainable fashion to begin with, nobody really. It was a couple of names come to mind, Livia Firth, and it comes up in the literature. Not that I pick on this woman, but I have good reason to, but I try not to. She was one of the, the names that will pop up. Oh, the green carpet challenge with Stella McCartney. And as it turns out, she ran her business into the ground, Eco Age. And what did it accomplish? It accomplished a wonderful thing. It put money in her bank account, right? Nothing's changed. We still have the Uyghurs in China. We still have the Rohingyas in Myanmar. We still have overproduction. We still have Onyango, who should be having a wonderful design studio, fighting the good fight. And we have Lars trying to, figure out the dynamics of these critical, Excel sheets to try to, make sense out of what's going on. So there you go. That's my 2 cents about sustainable fashion. Oh, but by the way, it doesn't exist. So, and this is a great story. I gave a paper in New York City at LIM College years ago with this wonderful young scientist from NYU. He was a winner of the H&M, okay? H&M gives the Global Change Award every year, and they give $1 million. And 4 people at the time would get $250,000. So one of the $250,000 winners was presenting with me. His name was Dr. Miguel. So, he gets up there, he's giving his talk, this wild thing about him. The reason H&M gave him $250,000 is because it was a great soundbite. Can you imagine? We have a winner here that's making solar textiles. So I said to him, he's up there finishing up his talk, and I said, excuse me, I have a question. I said, you just got, the Global Change Award, and this is solar textiles. And I said, well, let me think. You need solar panels to create the solar energy, correct? And he says, yeah. And I said, well, what are you going to do with the solar panels when you finish making your fabric? He goes, I haven't thought that far ahead. God help us. That's all I'm saying. So it's just the whole big picture. is, you know, just a step away. It's just but let's get there. So I'm probably over and I haven't even done what I'm supposed to do.
Well, we are just out of time, but thank you very much, Lien, for your intervention. I'd like to close the podcast with other two really key guests who are going to be, they are special guests and commentators. Is Batman Musasia from Kenya, will comment on the real damages caused by the second-hand industry fueled by the textile warlords running a profitable business supported by waste colonialism. And then I'd like to hear at the end of the podcast the final comment, you know, overall the podcast by Michael Stanley Jones. So please welcome Batman Musasia from Cleanup Kenya.
Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be participating in this once again. Of course, I've spoken a lot about the issue of West colonialism and the whole trend of used clothing and how it impacts African countries and communities. And you know, it's wonderful to hear from Nina, especially, and what I usually call my soulmate when it comes to this discussion, Leanne. Thank you for your wonderful intervention. Yeah, I think for me, the global trade of used clothing is an international scandal, if you ask me. And many people don't know this, or they have limited information about this. But when you look from how it starts and, you know, to how it ends, it's basically designed as a scandal, because you know, like the people in the West, out of goodwill and charity, they donate their clothes, and usually they donate this clothing mostly to charities like the Salvation Army, British Hearts Foundation, and so forth. But once the clothes have been donated, eventually they find their way into recycling companies, businesses, profiteers, who have turned the goodwill of donating cloth into a business. And, you know, they are so strategic and structural in a way that, you know, they control the trade, not just in Europe, but also abroad. For example, the statistics, the data that I've looked at when we were doing a report 2 years ago with Changing Markets Foundation, we found out that you know, one company from Europe controls up to 32% of clothing that is sent from Europe to Kenya. So they get the clothing from the charities, and then here in Kenya, they have registered a subsidiary so that they control the whole supply chain.
Sorry if I interrupt you, Batman. Can you name this company? Maybe I have an idea. I don't know if it's the same one.
Yeah, Baltic Textiles. We mentioned it in our report. Baltic Textiles.
Baltic. I mentioned it at the beginning.
Yeah. Here in Kenya, they also have thrift shops, a chain of them, branded as Think Twice. And, you know, we have videos. I've gone into their shops and I have videos. and you can see that they do sorting in the shops here in Kenya, which means that abroad they are not doing any sorting. And
But they are
you know,
not.
they are not doing any sorting. And you know, in the report that we produced and the documentary, we were able to find out that, you know, this cartel, these profiteers, they are staffing in the belts that they send to countries like Kenya with up to 40% waste. So in other words, because there is too much clothing because of the overconsumption in Europe and in the West, there is too much clothing available. So instead of sending this clothing to the incinerators in Europe or managing them there, the West there, so these companies, simply what they do is that they stuff them in the bells, the containers that Leanne was talking about, and bring them to Africa. So the demand is not there, you know, like they're the ones creating the demand, you know. The demand is not there. They are simply like trying to get as much clothing as possible into Africa, because, you know, when they sell the bell, they make their money. And they're the ones who determine what price to sell here, because they control the supply chain on both ends. On both ends. And so what happens is that, you know, we have traders here in Kenya who buy these bells. And when they buy the bells, they don't know what is in it. And because they don't know what is in the bell, they have to open and try and sell whatever they can sell, and the rest goes into the rags industry. So they have to open as many bells as possible, so that you know, they can try and make, you know, a little profit. And so, if you ask me, this trade is it's quite scandalous, and I have, you know, given a speech to the European Parliament last year about this. And last year also, I had the opportunity to meet with the Minister for Environment for Sweden here in Kenya and talk to him about this problem, and gave our suggestions on what needs to change. But I don't think, you know, like the West is interested in solving this problem, and so that's why, you know, like we think now that you know, like, because Europe is talking about circularity, and when they talk about circularity, you know, what does it mean? For us, it means like Europe is thinking, okay, let's send our used clothing or unwanted clothing to Africa so we can buy more. For us, we think that is their definition of circularity. They don't know what circularity means. Here in Kenya, we have and even in Africa, we have a long history of circularity, because you know, like my clothes, if they don't fit me or something, or I don't like the style, I give them to my brother, or I give them to my uncle, or my uncle gives the clothes to me. That is what circularity means. Circularity does not mean that your unwanted clothes, you send them abroad so that you can buy new clothes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And some of the clothes, they don't even, you know, wear them. Like, you know, like when you go to the markets and you open the bells, you find that, you know, somebody bought clothes, but they didn't even wear them. They still have the labels and all of that. So I think we need to put more scrutiny to this problem of used clothing being sold across borders. In the beginning, I thought that perhaps we could find a solution whereby we develop an APR, a global APR system, where the fees, they follow the clothing. So for example, if France, which has been collecting, APR fees from brands for some years now, like some of those fees, they send them to receiving countries. Originally, I was thinking that could be a solution, and I spoke with the environment minister for Sweden extensively on this matter. But I don't think that Europe is interested in that from the conversation that I've listened to over the last month. So I'm thinking that, if we have to continue with circularity of clothing, we need to close the borders so that, the clothing in England, they circulate within England, the used clothing. The clothing in Germany, they circulate. Because if Europe is not, interested, or the US, they are not interested, we cannot continue to allow the Western colonialism to continue, because countries in the global South, they are the ones that are left to manage the end of life of this clothing, which has a cost, to the economy. So a country like Kenya, we have many problems, poverty alleviation, education, and so forth. So instead of focusing on solving those problems, we have to spend more money to manage somebody else West. So I think I think that's the discussion that needs to start.
Yeah.
Because if they are not interested, then why should we be left to handle our clothes? And I hear people on online from the West saying these people, they need the clothes, it has an economic advantage to them. The traders, they would starve to death if they didn't have this business. I think that's sorry to use the word, but that's bullshit. Because if you close the trade, those traders will still sell, but this time they'll be selling new clothes, the clothes that are made here in Africa. The farmers will benefit, the one who are growing cotton. So I think we need to relook at this, and I'm always excited to come here to this podcast so that I can share these thoughts. Thanks, Joy.
Thank you. Thank you, Betema. As always, it's a very moving speech. Thank you. I think Lars has a question. Lars, please.
I just wanted to come in with a comment because I really appreciate all this information being put out. This is really important. As I see it, the problem with used clothes and the environment and climate effects of that is now a much bigger problem than what is happening in the production, and it's a very overlooked problem. And I grew up in Africa myself, in East Africa, in Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Kenya, South Africa, so this concerns me a lot. Just want to put one thing on the table, is that I think from the EU, there is policy interest in trying to avoid, the export or minimize the export of textiles to Africa from the EU. That's reflected in the policies. Whether that will be effective or not, I don't know. But I also want to put on the table that while we see that the exports from the EU is more or less stable, we see huge increases in exports from China and from the US. So this is coming from many different regions, and the challenge, as you have argued, is getting bigger. I agree, because a lot of the clothes are becoming cheaper and of lower quality. So this is something that we urgently have to deal with, and this is why it's good that we're here to get together also to discuss what to do and who can do what, and also raise awareness about it, because it's not something everybody is fully aware of, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I agree with Betterman when he says that in this sense, we should close the border and each one should deal with his own, textile problem and with his own rubbish, rather than sending these bales full of authentic rubbish. And actually on this point, you can also, Betterman, please feel free to share with me later on all the information you have to report and all your research, and I will publish it later on as a post show report. And I'd like to hear now from our special guest and commentator. It's the second time that I have the pleasure to introduce Michael Stanley Jones. Is joining the conversation to comment freely on the topics that we have discussed today, and he will share his amazing insights and knowledge with us. Thank you. Thank you all. Please welcome Michael.
Thank you very much, Shara. And thank you for all the speakers who've really stimulated thinking today about the issue of fashion, textiles, and circularity. I want to start with drawing together some points made by several of the speakers, that circularity is so much more than just thinking about end of life or waste management or waste export issues. Circularity begins with design, and it begins with selection, actually the generation of fibers for producing fabric. Fashion is a life cycle, and clothing really needs to be thought in circular terms from its point of origin, which in my view should be from the fibers that are raised by farmers to go into the weaving of textiles. We have not heard the word plastics today, and much of the problem of the waste stream implicates the plastic industry. More than 2/3 of all fibers in clothing produced globally are made from synthetic fibers. One problem we have heard something about is that much of the fashion waste stream is toxic. That is, it contains chemicals that are polluting water and polluting land and impacting the health, particularly the frontline waste picker community, the people who collect and sort this waste from uncontrolled landfills, for example. They're exposed to horrific levels of toxic chemicals. Endocrine disrupting compounds were mentioned, endocrine disruptors as part of that chemical soup that comes off of our clothing. And that's because thousands of chemicals are used in the production of fiber and textiles that go into clothing. There is a negotiation globally on a global plastics treaty and a push to address the toxic substances, the toxic chemicals that are used in the production of plastics. It's highly controversial. There's a lot of pushback from governments. Those negotiations will continue with their 5.2 round, the second half of their 5th round, this August in Switzerland. But hopefully out of this summer, this August negotiation, we will have a outline, a framework of a global plastics treaty. And that should also address issues that make the waste stream of fashion so toxic. We did not hear too much about Copenhagen Fashion Week, which I had thought might be targeted by some of the discussants. We know that there has been a complaint filed by the Danish Consumer Council to the Danish Consumer Ombudsman. Tanya Gotthardsen was also leading on that Danish Consumer Council complaint. Danish Consumer Council is a non-governmental organization, but a highly respected one. And so their filing or joining Tanya's complaint is significant. But in my reading of some of the literature about those complaints is that the issuance by the by the Copenhagen Fashion Week of sustainability requirements obfuscates some of the real issues behind the unsustainability of fashion. Brands' overproduction and the frequency at which we collect the waste stream from that overproduction. Those are not issues that fashion weeks, or Copenhagen Fashion Week in particular, which stages fashion shows twice a year, several times a year, they're not really designed to address overproduction, but they do screen every company, every brand that shows in their weeks, and they have to meet certain, what they call sustainability requirements. A second criticism of those requirements is that they're too vague. The complaint was filed in March of this year. It has not been ruled on by the authorities in Denmark. It is also claimed that the European Union's Green Claims Directive, which is in play, it's in development, could address greenwashing issues, and the accusation here is that Copenhagen Fashion Week and 7 of the brands that have appeared in their runways are violating greenwashing provisions. But at the EU level, greenwashing provisions are not yet law. They're being developed. At least as of January, they were still being negotiated. So this raises, I think, a whole other set of issues when we talk about EU regulation addressing waste export, addressing extended producer responsibility, the design, passports, product passports, and so on. All of these things are either adopted but not yet implemented, or they're still under discussion at the political level by the EU. We don't expect, for example, the new waste export directives to come into force until 2029. The extended producer responsibility schemes, such as France's, which was mentioned, they've had one in place for some time, those will be implemented at national level, but not until 2029. And so all of the new regulations and legislation are not yet, we can't really feel the benefits that come from them. There are things we should be focused on, and I've mentioned this before in my last intervention for this group, and that is that you should watch carefully, country by country, how faithfully they're implementing these new regulations. Are their schemes really going to penalize fast fashion producers and hopefully force them off the market because of the high taxes or high fees they'll charge for dealing with the waste that they produce at national level? And if every country does what they should, the European Council and the European Commission will judge that they have met the threshold of the new EU regulation. Among the most important parts of the waste export regulation, which is not directed solely at fashion, it's also directed at plastic waste, for example. But as again, much of fashion is made of synthetics, so that is plastic fibers. Well, much of that will only work if countries outside the EU that are traditional recipients of waste, Nigeria, Kenya, other countries, if they themselves do not gain exemptions and work around the legislation. And certainly for political and economic reasons, many of those countries are expected to try to challenge their status and to claim, yes, we have sustainable measures in place. Well, if I'm a citizen of one of these recipient countries, I would want to look very carefully at what their government's claiming, and I would want to see the evidence that they do have circular measures in place, that they are properly handling the waste stream from the importation. If not, then that should be banned under the EU legislation. So the longer or higher level lesson from all of this is regulations are needed. It is true, we can't just act as individuals. We need community level action, and there's no community stronger perhaps than the nation state, and then supranational organizations like the European Union to enforce regulations. Enforcement is extremely important. Lax enforcement might be what Copenhagen Fashion Week lacks the most and needs to improve upon. But there is some good news, and I'll finish with this because I like to stop with some good news. And that is, in April of this year, Copenhagen Fashion Week adopted 31 new standards to strengthen their sustainability requirements. And some of those standards include third-party auditing. Some of them include moving from aspirational objectives, that is, statements by fashion designers that we're going to do good and meet your requirements, to actually requiring they have plans in place and that they're measurable, and so on. So there is a maturation of the movement. It's true, fashion weeks are not the place I would expect to find a backlash against consumer fashion. They actually exist to sell clothes. But on the other side, without efforts like Copenhagen Fashion Week, you wouldn't have the influence that Berlin Fashion Week and Amsterdam Fashion Week and the Nordic Fashion Council are spreading throughout the fashion community in the EU region. You wouldn't have that, and you would end up with what we have in New York City, which is a fashion week which has 0 standards, 0 requirements, and shows no movement. My goodness, if you watched the Met fashion show last week, you would be horrified to see how ridiculously, flagrantly unsustainable the designs are coming out of these fashion weeks. So I think there's no comparison, and we should push Copenhagen Fashion Week and the other shows that are adopting their requirements to enforce them more strongly, to strengthen them, and to make sure that the brands that are associated with them are not abusing their status.
Michael, thank you very much for your comment and your insights, which were absolutely fantastic, I have to say. I also wanted to hear a little bit more in this session about the tax havens and more about the greenwashing, but maybe these are topics to be continued on the next episode. I think Leanne has a question. We need to close at 4, so we are really, over time. So there is a question from Leanne, and I don't know if there is any further question from the audience, but please bearing in mind that we have to end this session by 4. Thank you.
Michael, thank you for bringing that up. I just got very long-winded and didn't complete my thoughts on the Copenhagen Fashion Week, but I actually did hear from Tanya. We were in communication this past week, who actually filed the grievance. And it was interesting. She says the complaint she filed, okay, with regard to a brief status, there is not much to relate yet. The Danish Consumer Authority is still reviewing the complaint, and it remains to be seen if they will take on the complaint. So there's no guarantee, even after all of this, that anything's going to be done. In its entirety are select key elements to pursue. It all comes down to resources and the sum and gravity of cases being handled at the moment. Furthermore, these cases take time, and the complaint that I filed against Zalando 4 years ago took 3 years before the verdict was final, as it went on to be treated by the European Commission and not just national authorities. Other cases have been settled within months, so providing a timeline is not easily straightforward. The Fashion Week has, the complaint has sparked an intensified oversight from the Danish authority, who have declared that for the remainder of 25, they will sharpen their focus on claims from the fashion and cosmetic industries. And last week, the International Consumer Protection Body, ICPEN, published a letter to the global fashion industry urging them to clean up their marketing. So what does that mean? So while there is little news on the specific case, it has actually begun to work as a catalyst. So this is from the horse's mouth, and this is an actual update from John.
Wonderful to hear that, Leanne. That's exactly what I would expect and hope. That pressure would be put on them, that they will consider the complaints carefully. But while they're adjudicating the complaint, that doesn't mean that the companies and the public, the consumers, can't be moving forward. They can put pressure on them. Copenhagen Fashion Week, as I said, has already taken some steps, but those sustainability requirements are not set in stone. They are evolutionary, and I would expect that they will continue to strengthen their standards, and they will do that at a faster pace if it's demanded by the public.
Well, and they have every reason to, because they can actually, I actually also wrote to the Copenhagen Fashion Week leadership and asked them for a copy of their budget, which they were wonderful to direct me to a Danish site. So I had to decipher this in Danish. But I got what I needed, and it looks like their operating budget, their take-in is just over 2 million. It's not too shabby per year in US dollars. So that said, if they don't get their act together, they could end up being subjected to a 4% sanction of their entire annual take. So I would say, it's not peanuts, but on the other hand, it's something.
They operate on a shoestring, and they have a very small staff, and that may be one reason compliance is in question. They need to strengthen their oversight. That's the main message I see from this complaint.
Right. And the other thing I want to say, not to interrupt, but frankly, the Sustainable Fashion Show, I'm part of the advisory board for an international global sustainable fashion week in Hungary and Budapest. And I'm almost pulling my hair out over this one. It's the designers too. They don't understand. So this gentleman from the United States, Justin Haynes, he is an up and coming, sustainable designer. He uses secondhand clothing to put patches on his clothes. Good for you. And I've talked to him on the phone. He doesn't live far from here. So as it turns out, what does he do? Not even a month or two after he shows this stuff in Budapest, he gets the award for the Sustainable Designer of the Year. The biggest endocrine producer in the world, Reebok, he signs a contract with them, and he's ending up in 42nd Street on the billboards in Manhattan. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're screwed.
Can I shout out to Anyango? I had something I wanted to say, but we only have 2.5 minutes left. But Anyango, Reet Alice from Estonia, did a training program in Kenya on upcycling and trained a dozen Kenyan designers, and then held a fashion show at the in Nairobi in Westlands, and I attended it and interviewed some of those designers. So absolutely, what you're doing is recognized and highly appreciated, not only by Kenyans but also by the European design community.
Thank you.
That's great to hear, Michael. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I didn't wear the upcycled shirt that I bought at that show, but it's one of my favorites.
You should have
where's your fashion statement? Usually it's
where is your
clothing.
The Roi Soleil style, yeah, Michael. That was fantastic. Well, I don't know if there is any further question. We really run out of time. We don't have any time left, so I don't know if there is any crucial question from anyone. If not, I mean, I could listen to you forever, but unfortunately, we've been really, over time. And
I wanted to just say, in terms of the offshoring, but the bottom line there is the absence of binding global standards and the leniency of the Cayman Islands.
Yeah.
You know, Shein is now actually incorporated there, so that tells you everything.
Yeah, but I mean, we can pick up these topics on you know, on the next episode. Really, it was an honor really to be the moderator of this fantastic panel with all this, you know, thank you much. I will be publishing. Thank you, Lars. If you have to go, don't worry. Thank you very much. We are also leaving now. Again, it was a fantastic, you know, session. I have to say, this has been by far one of the best episodes of Enjoy Vintage Sustainable Fashion. So I'm looking forward to future cooperation together. And thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your contribution today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. It was a pleasure.
You. Bye.
Thank you.
Finito.